So for the ladies who just walked in at the after we've done the introductions, I'm Helena Taylor. I'm Local Nature Recovery Coordinator at Essex County Council, and I'm going to be presenting today on the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, but also the Local Nature Partnership as well. I thought I'd do a very kind of high-level overview of Local Nature Recovery Strategy and partnership as well. So the Local Nature Recovery Strategy was introduced in the Environment Act 2021 as a statutory requirement. So Essex County Council were appointed as the responsible authority to deliver the strategy on behalf of Greater Essex. So that covers Southend and Thurrock as well, being two unitary authorities. So it's all 14 local authorities. And Essex County Council set up and launched a local nature partnership in March last year in 2022, with one of the primary aims of that partnership being to support the delivery of the strategy, because I'll talk about it a bit later, but it's very much a partnership effort to produce the strategy. Essex are just the kind of responsible people to actually publish it, but it's very much a collaborative process. So that's just a sort of small overview, but I will go into a bit more detail in my other slides. Wanted to introduce the Local Nature Partnership to start off with. So, as I said, the partnership launched March last year, so we've been up and running about a year. Local Nature Partnerships are not a new initiative. They were first introduced in a white paper through government in 2012. So we are kind of we're 10 years after that, and we're setting up a Local Nature Partnership. But it's actually come at a really good time because there's lots happening in Essex, lots happening with our partner organisations and within local authorities for the environment. So it's actually, there's a lot of momentum behind it. And from what I've heard from other local nature partnerships that were set up at that time, they didn't quite have the momentum behind it. So some have fizzled out and had to start up again now that the Local Nature Recovery Strategy is being requested. So it's been really successful in the last year. We have a chairman, so it's chaired by Simon Lister, who is a really experienced conservationist, really enthusiastic. He was Director General of the Wildlife Trust for 10 years. He's had a career in wildlife law. And we have a board that Simon chairs, which is sort of made up of all different sectors, kind of director level board. And then we have 4 working groups sort of underneath the board as well. And I'll get onto those in a minute. But the board agreed on 4 targets that are really, again, you can see they're high-level targets for the partnership to be working on. And those are increase natural green infrastructure from 14% to 25% by 2030. All of these targets are by 2030. 50% of farms to be using sustainable farming practices. 1 in 4 people to be taking action for nature by 2030. And access to high quality green space for all by 2030. So those are our targets, and I've kind of got these 2 as the green space, environmental ones, and then those 2 on the other side as our people targets, people and nature connection targets. And we have about 40 to 50 organisations now all working together to deliver these shared targets. And the benefit of that is that the targets can be more ambitious. You can see they're quite ambitious targets, but because we've got everyone working towards them collectively, they're more achievable and they can be more ambitious. So that's the kind of aims of the partnership. I'm sure this is probably not like a new message that I'm going to be talking about now, but as there's probably a lot of people interested in climate environment in the room, but I thought I'd introduce why the Local Nature Recovery Strategies, I'll say LNRS, it's a long title, why the LNRS is important and why now. So globally and in the UK, we're suffering a loss of species, loss of habitat, and an increasement of fragmented habitat. So it means that where land use change and increased agriculture is on the rise, habitats are being separated from each other, which means wildlife can't travel across the landscape, they get stuck and they're isolated. So that's increasing. And then loss of habitat in general, which means loss of species diversity, loss of pollinators. So this is what we're seeing UK, but globally as well. And also, the local nature recovery strategy has come at a good time for biodiversity net gain. So they do sort of go hand in hand. But I won't go too much into net gain because that's a whole other presentation. But essentially, it's a change to the way biodiversity is considered in development. Nature has to be replaced plus 10% of that when a development basically removes that nature. Comes into law November 2023. That's a legal requirement for developments, and the local nature recovery strategy is there to direct that that nature replacement, basically, for biodiversity net gain in very kind of summary terms. So there's lots of reasons why it's incredibly important that we put together this strategy. And so I thought a good time to move on to what is the strategy and what will it do. So as I said, it's introduced in the Environment Act, statutory requirements, so we have to do this. It's really important for biodiversity that we do this, but we're not the only ones doing it. Every county in England has a responsible authority that has to put together a strategy. So all our neighbours, Kent, London, Cambridgeshire, everyone has to produce this strategy. And the idea is that all the strategies will link up, all the maps will connect up. There'll be no gaps and no spaces in between to form a England-wide nature recovery network. And that's acknowledging again that nature doesn't just stop at the Essex border. It does move across freely a landscape, particularly along the coast. And so this nature recovery network is really key to the strategy. So we're part of a much bigger picture, England-wide. The strategy, as I mentioned, is put together collaboratively. So we have, although we have 40 to 50 organisations in the partnership, there's actually a lot more stakeholders involved in the strategy and building it. And that's really key to bring together everyone's objectives, everyone's aims for nature recovery into one strategy. And that's the kind of aim of it. It's not just a county-council strategy, it's everyone coming together to put their thoughts and ideas into it. And as I said, nature recovery network there. What will the local nature recovery strategy do? So we were waiting for guidance from DEFRA, so government department, for about a year. And the guidance was finally released about what we actually need to include in the strategy in March. So we've had that for a couple of months now. So we've been able to make a lot of progress, since we received that guidance. And essentially the strategy will map existing spaces for nature. As you can imagine, it will map all our local wildlife sites, local nature reserves, ancient woodlands, all of those sites. But it will also map opportunities for nature recovery. So opportunities in which we can connect up those habitats, opportunities to create new habitat corridors, but also opportunities to enhance the nature that is already there as well. The maps are a really key part of the strategy. It's meant to be quite an interactive document. The LNRS will also drive directed change on the ground for nature recovery. So it can be used, the strategy can be used by community groups in planning, for biodiversity net gain. There's a whole range of uses and it's meant for everyone. And that's why partnership working is so important to deliver the strategy. And in turn, coordinate environmental investment into those areas. And that's particularly through biodiversity net gain, but also can support community groups if they wanted to do some habitat enhancement work. It's in the strategy, and that backs up their argument that they should work on that project and get funding for that project. So it's helpful in multiple ways. This is a bit of a overview diagram of our delivery structure. So you can kind of, I don't suppose you can see all of these words on here, but it gives you an idea of the stakeholders involved. At the top, we have Essex County Council who are delivering it. So it's myself and my manager and Lucy and that team. But then we have the LNRS working group and supporting authorities. And those are our two really key groups to delivering the strategy. The LNRS working group, as I mentioned, is all our sort of external partners like Essex Wildlife Trust, RSPB, Essex and Southwark Rivers Trust, all those partners that are doing lots of really good things for nature recovery already. And then supporting authorities are all our local authorities in Essex. So that's all 12 district and boroughs, cities, and then the 2 unitaries as well. They are all key to delivering the strategy. But then we've got a whole range of subgroups, farmers and landowners, coastal representatives, Natural England. There's a lot of influence on the strategy, and that will eventually produce the maps and the strategy content. But that gives you an overview of what we're working with, that it's not kind of, we're not working in isolation here, it's very much a partnership strategy. And then this is a little timeline as well. So we should be on track to work to this timeline, and that this is our aim. So when we got the guidance in March, there was no deadline, but DEFRA said 12 to 18 months to deliver this strategy. So our overall kind of goal is to have the strategy finalised by June 2024, so June next year. We are roughly here at the moment, so we're hopefully going to be starting mapping work soon. We're working with a company called Ground Control to produce the maps, both the baseline maps and the opportunity maps as well. And then we're starting to develop the strategy content, working with a broad range of stakeholders. So we are here and we're on track. This is really key, I think, for this group and this audience, is the public consultation. So we are welcoming, and we really, really appreciate a response from groups such as the Women's Institute to that public consultation. If there could be a collective response from all of your objectives and aims, that's really one way in which you can get involved in this. And each response to the public consultation will be considered and will influence the strategy, because the stakeholder engagement is a really key part of the process. They won't be ignored, they will definitely be included, and we'll be working with an engagement specialist to do that, and to make sure that those objectives and aims of our partners are influenced, but are influencing our strategy. So that public consultation, roughly the end of this year, but it will go out for 6 weeks. So if it goes out in November, it will close in December, but if it goes out in December, it will close mid-January 2024. So it will be out for a total of 6 weeks. So I think that is the end of my slides. I've put questions, but I do questions at the end.